In conversation with Shenandoah Chefalo. Shenandoah Chefalo is a sought-after speaker, award-winning author, an expert trauma-informed specialist with over 20 years of leadership consulting experience with governmental, public, and private organizations. Shen Chefalo is a workforce transformation strategist, award-winning author, and founder of Chefalo Consulting. With a lived experience in the foster care system, Shen is deeply committed to creating authentic cultures and empowered teams that foster resilience, accountability, and social impact. She works with organizations globally, encouraging, empowering leaders and teams to move beyond surface level solutions and achieve sustainable, co created change. She is the author of Garbage Bag Suitcase, a memoir that highlights the need for reform in child welfare and workforce system, and the host of Mindful Management podcast. And in today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to have on the show today, Shen Chefalo. How are you doing today, Shenandwa?
Thank you, Peter, so much for having me on. Super excited, honored to be a guest on your program.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. It's quite interesting. We're here to sit down and have a conversation around your work. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
You've had some amazing guests in the past. I'm delighted to be one of the ones featured.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, Shanandra, I need to first say that I really do love reading through the Bext Bunny, which I find to be quite amazing and quite lovely. And I would like to ask you, what inspired you to write this book? And why do you choose to explore grief through a child's perspective? If I'd like to start from there.
Yeah, appreciate that, Peter. So, this has been a project that's been on my mind for a long time.
Mm.
Um, Unlike you, Peter, I've never considered myself a writer or an author. It wasn't something I necessarily set out to do, but we were very fortunate when I wrote Garbage Bag Suitcase, which
Mm.
was a memoir about my time in foster care, that almost immediately after it came out, lots of people started saying, "This is great, but I can't share it with young kids."
Mm.
And I was hearing from a lot of adults who wanted a way to help kids process
Mm.
grief, trauma, the hard things that they go through. And I think that's because one of the main characters in my memoir is a stuffed animal, right? Like that's still a quintessential theme in my book. She sits right here with me every day. And so I had the thought pretty early on that that character needed a spin-off into their own version for kids so
Mm.
that we could help kids process some of the hard things that they see and go through.
Hmm. Oh, wow. That's such an amazing inspiration, really. I love your take on that. Sounds to me like an amazing way into becoming a writer, a lovely ride into becoming an author. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And also, I'd like to ask you, Shane, how did your own childhood in foster care system shape the voice or perspective of the main character in the Bext Bunny? And also, what deeper message does it carry for adult reader, especially caregivers and educator, if you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most illustrated books, or even if you think about animated movies, right?
Mm,
They're
yeah.
they're made for children, that's true. But there's usually this undertone that children
Mm,
don't understand that is really actually for adults and caregivers. And that's what we tried to do with this book. And this book kicks off a series of books around all kinds of different topics that we normally don't get to talk about with kids, per se.
mm,
And so for me, my time in foster care
yeah.
was met with a lot of not knowing what was going on and not having a
Mm,
way to connect and process that with people. And
uh,
so our main character, Little Shen, is a fictional take off of some of the experiences that I had as well, but
mm,
seen through myself at the time of being a child, versus when we talk about a memoir or something like that, it's really more a reflection of how
Mm,
I now see my childhood. I really tried to have this book be how it felt and what it looked like when I was that age in that system.
mm. Oh, wow. I'm also, that's an amazing one, really. That's really a lovely one. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And also wanted to ask you, can you tell us more about the idea of imagine a Shen? As used in your book. How did it come
Yeah.
about? And also, was
Yeah.
Little Shen based on someone in real life, or is she purely fictional? Is it just an imaginary made character? Tell us, run us through that.
Yeah. So imagination, I'm glad that you sort of see the take there, right? Our main character is little Shen. And again, although this is a fictionalized story, it's based on a lot of the things that have happened in my life. And then even as I became a parent, things that have happened. So something that occurs in our everyday household
Mm,
is that we love to work people's names into everyday words, right?
right.
So
Yeah.
because my name is Shenandoah and almost everyone calls me Shen, any word that ends in that Tion in the shun sound, we work my name into typically, right? So appreciation,
Mm, yeah.
imagination. So when I was looking for a little catchphrase for our main character here, it became a great way to talk about imagination through
Mm,
this idea of imagination. This is Shen imagining what's going on and what's happening in
mm.
this conversation that she's having with her
Lovely.
side. And so, again, I think it's that play, and I think good writing does this.
Mm,
It takes and expands on something that's happening into a new and envisioned way into
mm.
books and characters. And I think that's also what makes it come alive for readers and for everybody who's interacting with the material as well.
Wow.
So Little Shen, our main character, is clearly based on me and my experiences, a take on that,
Mm.
and using her imagination.
Oh, wow. I must say that is so artistic. That is so thoughtful of you. That is such an amazing idea. That is such a lovely techniques that you had to pull out. The shine, imagination, appreciation, communication, everything shining at the back.
Poetry coming to life, Peter. That's your poetry. Yeah, it's just this idea of, something that we just do as kind of a natural family practice in our
Yeah,
family system that then works in this story and the retelling of things.
it's beautiful, really. I need to
Thank you.
commend that. Beautiful and quite commendable. Thank you. And also, the book deals with grief through a child's lens. How did you approach that balance of tenderness and raw honesty as used?
Thin lines in literature always,
Mm,
right? Like trying to walk that place of not avoiding a topic, because the whole point of this book series and something that struck me is that there's lots of books for kids on grief and emotions, but
mm,
they're often written from an expert or a doctor's lens or a psychologist's lens. And
mm.
while those are good, I wanted something that was written more for what is it like from a child's lens to
Let's
be in
see.
that
Yeah,
situation
yeah.
and approach grief. Because I think sometimes from adults, we think there's topics, oh, we shouldn't talk about that with kids.
You're
Um,
right.
but
Mm,
but whether we like it or not, kids are often in situations thinking about and dealing with topics that kids shouldn't necessarily be, but they are. And so
mm,
I wanted kids to not feel alone in that or feel isolated because when it feels like, oh, we can't talk about this thing, you begin to feel alone in that. And
mm,
that loneliness is really unhealthy for us, right? That's what we talk about in my big work with adults all the time is how
mm,
important connections are. And I didn't want kids to feel isolated because they may have different living circumstances, that they may not live with their birth mom or their birth dad, or that their family looks different than other families. And so just thinking about tackling those topics that are hard, but from a kid's point of view of like they still have to live in those situations even though they're hard situations. And
Mm.
what is that like? And not being afraid to talk about it.
That's an amazing concept. And sometimes I actually do think it's very important because if you think that, they are kids, they don't understand grief, they don't understand this, they actually do understand grief. Like,
Yes,
oh, grandmother, what's happening? Why everybody crying? I think grandmother is dead. And you don't want to tell her that, oh, grandmother is dead. You have to, oh no, go inside the room, go and play with your toys. They can tell that somebody is not
yes,
around. They can feel
yeah.
it. It's just that they don't really know how to express it, but they know that something has happened.
Something is different, right?
Something
Something
is
isn't
wrong
the same
somewhere.
as it was. Something is wrong. Something is not
Mm,
right. And I think as adults, we try to sidestep that instead of just talking about it. And I wanted this
mm,
book from an adult perspective to be a way to talk about it, right?
mm,
Maybe it's difficult for you to say, hey, let's sit down and have this conversation with a young child. And the
mm,
book kind of gives us an opening to say, hey, have you ever felt the way that little Shen felt, right? Have you ever
mm.
been in that situation and what have you done? Because I think it's the avoidance that, right? If we
Yeah,
think back to our childhoods, the
yeah.
things that we're holding on that are still painful from childhood are oftentimes the thing nobody else has recognized or has seen as painful for
Mm,
us. And so the more that we can talk about those things, I think the healthier we become as we grow up, we come
absolutely.
into our adult bodies and we start talking about mental health and the long-term
Absolutely.
effects of those things that happen to us in our childhood. So
Mm,
hopefully the book is an easier way for people who maybe feel uncomfortable
mm,
talking about these things with kids. And that's our hope, not only with this book, but for the series as we tackle more complicated subjects, right?
mm,
Is how do you grieve and that it's okay to grieve, that it's okay
okay.
to be sad, that it's okay to
Mm,
not feel great.
mm,
And that it doesn't mean something's wrong with you just because you're
mm.
not happy.
Oh, wow, that's an amazing one, really. Learning how to talk about the things we often sweep under the carpet, the things
Yes.
we often want to cover up and not, talk. That's such an amazing concept, an amazing theme to want to explore. I haven't really read much children's book that are particularly in this genre, dealing with this subject line. So this is really uncommon and very impressive and well
Oh, thank
commendable,
you so much.
really.
Appreciate that. And it's we also didn't want the book just to be sad, right? Like it's the expression of that grief,
Yeah.
but for kids oftentimes they don't have the same attachments that maybe we do. They can talk
Mm,
about it and then let it go and then maybe they want to talk about it again in a few weeks,
yeah.
but keeping it light, and I think that's why the characters, Bunny Best in this book, and then the characters that
Yeah.
come in the forthcoming books
Yeah.
are so critical because who we have as adult help and who we rely on, maybe that's your partner or,
Mm,
friends or whoever that happens to be.
yeah.
Sometimes for kids, it's hard to rely on adults, and you might
Mm,
rely on your imaginary friends or your
yeah.
stuffed animals or your schoolmates. So
Mm.
all of those pieces, I think, become important when we talk about these difficult
This
topics.
is very interesting and quite lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. And also like to ask you to Shen, when little Shen didn't go to the casket or was unnoticed, was there a backstory or experience that influenced this part of the story particularly? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's again drawing from my personal experience, but I think that's one of the fun pieces and will just show is that sometimes when you're sad,
Look at that.
it's okay to just be sad. And we can still do our daily activities. We can
What?
carry that with us. And then with time, right? By having somebody who has us, then then it might get better. It doesn't have to be great. It can just be okay.
Mm,
And I think that was one of the things for me that was missing, that is missing from a lot of children's material, is that
Mm.
everything doesn't have to have the happily ever after ending.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
can just have a I'm okay ending, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not, it doesn't have to be, I got this great bunny rabbit and now my life is all better and all my
Stop.
problems are solved. It's just, I got this bunny rabbit and I'm not alone.
Mm.
And things are hard, but they're easier with this friend.
Mm.
And I think that's a critical piece, not just for kids, but for adults, because it's not
Absolutely.
always sunshine and rainbows for everybody.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely statement. That is really a deep one. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I wanted to ask you now, Shen, because I found this to be quite interesting, really. How important was it for you to include an imaginary friend like Bonnie Best? And what role does Muri play in the emotional arc of the story?
Yeah. I mean, it was critical for me. I mean, Bunny Best is a critical component for me because that truly is what helped me survive my childhood.
Mm,
Was in my adult memoir, Bunny Best's character is actually called Love Bunny, and
mm,
it was through my pretend conversations with Love Bunny that I solved all of my life's
wow,
problems, right?
wow.
And it was the advice that my stuffed animal gave me. But
Mm,
I think a lot of us have those attachments to things from childhood that aren't necessarily people, right? Blankets, toys, something. I mean, if you ask almost every adult,
yeah.
what was the greatest thing from your childhood? It's
Mm,
usually a stuffed animal, a blanket. It's not actually a person that they
yeah.
were attached to. And
Mm,
so I wanted to make space for that and
mm,
that connection, that relationship is also really important for most of us, that it's not always our relationship with other actual human beings.
right.
Those are important, but that we sometimes have these relationships with inanimate objects or maybe a real life pet or something else that isn't human in nature
Mm,
that get us through really tough, hard times. And
right.
so that's a peak. And that's why Muriel's character, I think, in the arc becomes important because although she's this like supposed to be this solid, stable adult,
Mm,
for kids, it's not always the adult that's holding them together,
oh,
right?
wow.
From an adult perspective, it may seem that way, but from a kid perspective, the thing that might really matter is a stuffed animal or a
Mm,
blanket or a toy or some other object versus the way that the adults see it is like, hey,
mm,
we put this caseworker in your life or the social worker in your life.
mm,
Kids may not feel connected to that person in the same way adults think they should.
mm. Oh, wow. That is such a lovely and amazing answer to that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, what's your vision for the best Bonnie in the world? Where do you hope it lands, and what ripples do you want it to create, especially in the art of people who read it?
For me, right, the idea is to get it into the hands of children who need it the most. And so in my ideal world, if I was the world's richest person, Peter, it would be ensuring that kids across the world have access to books and literature that resonates with them of all kinds, right?
Mm,
So, I mean, I think every author would probably say the same thing. Of course, we want everybody to have our book in their hands.
right.
But I think there is also this place that this book gets to go, which is the ability to tackle topics that we've normally been afraid to tackle. And so, of course, I
Absolutely.
hope that we can do that through books. And what if here's us really dreaming and using our imagination, Peter.
Mm,
What if we could do it through an animated YouTube series for kids, so
mm.
kids around the world um, could watch the characters come to life and
Oh,
having some
wow.
of the same experiences that they're having?
Mm. Oh, wow, I must say this is really exciting, very wholesome, and quite powerful, really. You've got an impressive, important message in your book. As little as it is, it's quite concise, quite succinct, quite powerful, and very impactful. So thank you very much. for writing an impressive book as this.
I just appreciate it. Appreciate that you took the time to read the book and to spend time with us so we could talk about the adventures of Bunny Best and Little Shen.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And I'd just like to ask you before we call it a day today, what advice would you give parents or teachers using this book to support children dealing with loss? And what are some of the biggest misunderstandings that you think adults have when helping kids navigate through grief?
I hope that the book gives them an end to talk about it, right? So for
Yeah.
me, the one thing is let's stop brushing it under the rug, as you said. Let's sort of head on, be able to use this book to ask kids more questions. I think
Mm.
as adults, we can get more curious with kids. You know, if
Yeah,
you have preschoolers or early
absolutely.
elementary kids in your life, parents say, oh, they ask so many questions. And I
They
think that's
are
a wonderful stage.
very
I wish adults
inquisitive.
would ask kids those many questions, right? Of like, what did you hear when you watched that or when you read that? Or, how did that make you feel? I
Mm,
think it gives us the ability to get more curious with kids so that we can understand really where they are and what they're thinking about from their
mm.
perspective.
Wow, I love that answer. It is so well crafted together. Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. And where can interested viewers rather, get a copy of this book from?
Of course, it's available at all the major bookstores and Amazon.com, and they can visit
Mm.
us at sheffaloconsulting.com/books to pre-order and order all of our other books as well.
Interesting. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Chef Shen Chefalo book directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on our website and also another platform. I also left a link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Shenandoah, for accepting the invitation to sit down and come up to discuss your well-written The Best Bunny. And I must say, this is really exciting, quite impressive, and very thought-provoking. Thank you very much for coming on.
Peter, thank you again so much for having me. We hope everyone enjoys.
Absolutely.